So thank you everyone so much for coming along today. I'm quickly going to go around the people who will be speaking to you today and get them to introduce themselves, just so you know who's talking. So I'll go first. My name is Nelly. I'm Kent Union's Academic Policy and Representation Manager. I'm basically going to be running this strike forum, just kind of facilitating any issues, any questions, anything like that you have. So if you do have anything, we will go through kind of the process we're looking at running with tonight, but I'll let the others introduce themselves. So officers, do you want to get started first?
Hi everyone. I hope you can hear. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. So hi, I'm Zed. I'm the president of Kent Union this year, and thank you so much for being here at our strike consultation. I'll let Ben and Tom introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Ben, and I'm the Vice President of Postgraduate Experience. Thank you for being here tonight, and I hope it answers some of the questions you have.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Tom. Hello, everyone. I'm Tom, and I'm the Vice President for Welfare and Community. I hope today answers the questions that you might have.
Should we go to Richard next?
Yeah, happy to do so, Zed. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Rees, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Education Student Experience.
Thank you, Richard. And then I'm not sure who's here from UCU.
Shall I?
Brianna?
Yeah, there's a couple of us here. Hi, my name is Brianna Beck. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Psychology, and I'm also Vice President of our UCU branch here at University of Kent.
Lovely to have you here, Brianna. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
And is it Anamika as well?
Yeah. Hi, so my name's Anamika Mishra. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Kent in the law school, and I'm a committee member of the UCU at Kent.
Perfect. Thank you for being here, Anamika. Lovely.
Cool. We will just quickly go into a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to ask that you keep your mic muted and your camera off, and we will be taking questions at the end. Just that you know, we are also recording this meeting. The reason for that is there are lots of people who haven't been able to make any of the strike forums, so the hope is that this will give some useful information on what's happening, what the information is about the strikes this time, and what that means for you as students. This should be going up on the website in the next few days, but basically all the information is already on the Kent Union website, but we'll talk through it in a minute. But yeah, if you can just keep that going. If you do have any questions and you're not able to put your mic or your camera on for any reason at the end, then feel free to put them in the chat and we will keep an eye on that. But I'm going to hand over to the KU officers for them to talk through kind of some general context around the strikes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nelly. So we're just kind of going to run through what the strikes are. So a strike is a refusal to work organized by a body of employees as a form of protest, and normally in an attempt to gain movement on an ongoing dispute between the employer and the employees. That's kind of the general textbook definition. And if you are, a student at Kent in the past few years, you wouldn't have seen strike action, industrial action take place. You know what it's about. I will run through some of the jargon later on in this presentation, so you kind of understand what UCU is, what it means to be industrial action, like action short of strike. So I'll quickly just run through the UCU, which is the largest university staff union in the UK, and they've been campaigning on pension cuts, pay, and working conditions. And UCU members across the country voted on a national ballot whether to take industrial action, and they overwhelmingly went ahead with they basically supported industrial action. And the next round of strikes are in reaction to the university superannuation scheme, USS, which is the body that handles the pensions for university staff. And they rejected UCU's alternative proposal for pensions, pay, and conditions. That is what this round of industrial action is focused on. Strike days will be the 24th to 25th and the 30th of November. And action short of strike will begin from the 23rd of November. Move on to the next slide. So what does this mean for me? It's possible that teaching and supervision might not take place on the days of industrial action. It is difficult to know how strike action will impact individual students, as it differs from course to course and also depends on the level of study you're at. It's reasonable to expect that some schools will be impacted more than others by strike action. Members of staff who are taking industrial action aren't obliged to tell the university, in this case, in advance when they will be taking action. So you may get updates at a short notice. Now, we do say that you have to be careful not to make assumptions that your classes will just be cancelled or that submission deadlines within those industrial action periods will be extended, because that's not the case. If you are in any doubt at all over what's happening in your school or on your course, or you don't know whether someone is taking industrial action, I would really recommend you emailing your student support services, or your student experience teams, but also speaking to your lecturers and speaking to the people who teach you, because they have been encouraged to basically be transparent when asked direct questions around whether they're taking industrial action or not. And most of them, to be honest, will be very transparent on why they're doing it, their reasons behind it, but also have a whole conversation with you around it. Kent Union is here as the students' union. Our main priority is ensuring that students are supported during these periods of industrial action and that we are able to help in any way possible. So if you need any help, please do get in touch. We have the advice service, and you can get in touch with us officers specifically as well if you have any issues, and we can always speak to you on your behalf as well. The next slide.
So,
go on, Ben.
Yeah, sorry, I'm jumping in here. So why are we talking to students? So basically, Kent Union's stance pretty much depends on what the student body believe to be. If they want to be in support of it, we'll be in support of it. If they don't, then we won't. And the way this is decided is through Kent Union Parliament, in which members will generally vote if to support or not, and we'll base that information on our consultation with students. So that can include students in this forum right now, or in any of the others. We're out on the plaza asking students how they kind of feel about this action and generally seeing how that moves forward. So we've had similar consultations in the past year which have decided Kent Union's stance. Last year, for example, of the 2 strike actions, there were 2 different decisions made. Kent Union was in support of the first set of strikes and not the second, which were based on just how the students felt, how they kind of felt it had impacted them before, and where they wanted to go with. However, regardless of if Kent Union decide to support the strike action, we will still have the students as our top priority and always be the #1 thing in our mind. So if anyone needs any support during this time, as Zed kind of quite nicely highlighted, the advice centre is available, we're available, and we'll always want to make sure that your student experience is impacted as little as possible by this, and we support you in the ways that are best generally.
And just to add on to that as well, in KU Parliament, we have multiple different networks. So those networks will be speaking to their groups of students, getting that feedback in, and we'll be supplying them with the information from these consultations. So when they do decide their stance, if they do decide to vote in support of the industrial action, us as officers will also be supporting on behalf of the students, the lecturing, not the lecturing staff, the striking staff. On picket lines, we'll be supporting them in marches, and by supporting the striking workers by supplying them with refreshments, as it states there. So that's kind of how we go about it. We are student-led completely in the way we support or don't support these sets of industrial action.
I'll go to the next slide if that's all right now. Fantastic, thank you. So we're just going to go through very quickly a jargon buster just to kind of cover some of the stuff we've said. So UCU are the University and College Union who represent staff in higher education institutions across the UK. Industrial action is any form of protest taken by staff against their employer. In this case, it's over kind of UCU will explain it in full why they're striking. Generally. So the strike itself is an organised stoppage of work for a period of time for the purpose of disrupting the regular business of the employer, which in this case obviously also impacts students. Action short of a strike is generally action that's anything short of a strike, so it can be not covering absent staff, not working more than the contracted hours, or not providing additional materials, or even marking and assessment boycotts. USS is the university's superannuation scheme. I believe I said that right, which is ultimately the primary pension scheme offered by higher education institutions. And the next slide, if that's okay, Noah. So UCEA is the University and Colleges Employers Association, which represent universities in national negotiations with government bodies, unions, and other organizations. Teach Outs are free public events addressing themes and questions raised by the strike action. It really gives an opportunity for staff, students, and the wider public to learn from each other. And the Teach Outs also remind the university that it's the people who make education work, not the buildings or the technology inside. A marking and assessment boycott is what UCU's democratic bodies have previously decided on, which ultimately sees marking for the assessments be boycotted, and generally it can take longer in giving coursework back or providing kind of marks towards that. GTAs are graduate teaching assistants, who are usually PGR students, so postgraduate research students who also work for the university, usually on 0-hour contracts or on a stipend that allows them to teach. And hourly paid lecturers are, the 0-hour contract side of things, where they will be paid per hour and will provide teaching in various different divisions and assets.
Thank you, Ben. And I will pass it over to Brianna and Anamika for the Kent UCU information.
Thanks so much, and thanks for that great introduction. That already starts to cover a lot of what we want to talk about. Anamika, shall I talk through these slides and feel free to jump in? Or... Okay, great, thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So, as I said, I'm vice president of our branch of the UCU here at University of Kent, which is an association of staff at the universities, academic staff, support staff, the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. And there are branches at universities throughout the UK. And what's happened now is that members at 150 of these universities across the UK have collectively voted to support strike action, with a high turnout and a very high percentage of members voting in support. And the reasons that we're deciding to take this strike action fall into two general categories. So one is around pay, falling pay and worsening working conditions at the universities. This includes systemic inequalities in pay based on gender, ethnicity, and disability status, as well as increasing and unsustainable workloads and practices of casualization, so people being on insecure short-term contracts with very few hours guaranteed. The other area is around, here comes some of that jargon, the USS pensions dispute. So this is the scheme that a lot of university employees are enrolled in for pensions to support them later in life after retirement. And there have been enormous and unnecessary cuts made to our pension benefits that are going to cost us, it says thousands there, but it's actually for employees under the age of 40 on the order of hundreds of thousands of pounds of income later in life. So the potential to have a massive impact on our ability to support ourselves after retirement. As the Kent Union officers already mentioned, we are going to be participating in 3 strike days at the end of November. That's the 24th, the 25th, and the 30th of November. And we'll be doing this along with other members of staff at universities around the UK. Next slide, please. So just to say a bit more about why we're striking, I gave you sort of broad strokes, but just to say a little bit more about this. One of the main reasons is about sort of the way that universities are choosing to spend the money that they have. And it's worth noting that here at University of Kent, there are currently over 30 senior staff and managers earning 6-figure salaries over £100,000 per year, including Vice Chancellor Karen Cox, who earns above the national average for Vice Chancellors at £277,000 per year. While at the same time, sort of rank and file staff on the ground, the ones that you're interacting with, have seen their real terms pay, so accounting for inflation, has fallen by 25% since 2009. Our pensions are being cut by 35%. Working conditions are getting worse with problems of chronic overwork that's creating a mental health crisis in the universities, including here at the University of Kent. The university has done surveys showing this is actually a major problem contributing to, for instance, staff becoming ill because of chronic overwork and stress, staff having to take leave or high turnover of staff. And this, of course, all impacts directly on your experience in your education at university. Many of the staff that you interact with, your lecturers, counselors, support staff, seminar leaders, are on insecure contracts, which again contributes to this mental health issues and sense of precarity, given that they don't have a guaranteed income all the time and might not know whether they're going to have a job in the next few months. And of course, there are, as I mentioned, systemic inequalities based on gender, ethnicity, and disability. So across the sector, I believe the difference between white and Black staff is 17% gap in pay. For gender, it's a 16% gap, and for disability, it's a 9% gap. And this is not just a problem across the sector, but also specifically at the University of Kent as well. So we're calling on universities to really take proactive action and work with us to try to address these systemic inequalities, which at the current rate of change won't be resolved for decades. So as you can see, there are some really difficult issues to tackle. And the reason we're taking this strike action is to try to press our university managers and the managers of universities across the UK to negotiate with us, to work with us to resolve these issues and to improve working conditions, because this, as I mentioned, will have a direct impact on the experience that you receive as a student at the university. If you have staff who are sleep deprived, chronically overworked, worried about how they're going to pay their bills or feed their families, they're not going to be able to give you the best educational experience. They're not going to be able to provide that sort of support that you want in terms of, being able to speak with them, meet with them, get good feedback, that sort of thing. So we're trying to, by taking this action, we're trying to improve university conditions for everyone, for you and for staff at the university. Next slide, please. So what difference do we hope this will make? So as was mentioned earlier, going on strike is a way of withdrawing our labor to compel our employers to negotiate with us on these important demands for better and fairer working conditions, pay, and pensions. These are ongoing disputes. A lot of you will have experienced some kind of industrial action, strike action before. And I think it's always important to reiterate that we do not want to have to be taking this action. We don't get paid for the days that we're on strike. We have to stand out in the rain, usually, the cold. We would much, much rather just be able to get on with our jobs and just be in the classroom with you. But we really feel that it's necessary to take this action to be able to preserve the quality of education for you and the quality of the university as an employer. This is important because this is not only about negotiations locally here at the University of Kent, but our Vice Chancellor Karen Cox sits on the boards of these national university employer associations like Universities UK and the UCEA, University and College Employers Association that was mentioned earlier in that jargon slide. So Karen Cox is able to influence the direction of these issues and negotiations at the national level. So this is one way that we can encourage her to take action and make her voice heard to improve these issues at the national level. And of course, we recognize that this strike action can be disruptive. Again, we don't take this lightly. We don't want to cause disruption, but I would argue that the overall direction that universities are going in with the working conditions for staff, chronic underfunding and under-resourcing of staff that have direct impact on your education in the long term are going to be much more disruptive than these days of strike action will be, which is why we believe it's very important for us to take action, and we hope that you will support us as well. Next slide, please. So what can you do? Well, first of all, I hope that you will vote to support us as we take the strike action on these important issues regarding equality, fair working conditions, and pay. You can also email Vice Chancellor Karen Cox. As I said, she sits on these employer associations nationally. She can have a voice on these issues, and she will listen to you as well. So I would encourage you to get in touch with her and let her know that you want universities that are taking action to eliminate these kinds of systemic inequalities, that are wanting to treat their employees well and treat them fairly and create a good learning environment. We'll be sharing our strike calendar with events happening, the pickets, as well as teach outs and rallies. So please do come along. We're very friendly. We would love to speak to you on the picket line and talk to you about what's going on. So feel free to come by and speak to us. And if you are interested in getting more involved, you can email our Kent UCU administrator, Kester. His email address is there. Feel free to get in touch if, for instance, you want to come along to a rally, if you want to, maybe help share or design some posters and flyers. We would love to work with you on that. So thank you so much for your attention. Anamika, if you want to add anything now, and of course, we're very happy to answer any questions you've got.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Brianna. I think it was a fantastic summary of the action, of why we are striking, and what Kent Union and other students can do to support those of us. So this year I'm not working at the University of Kent, so I'm not holding a contract, so I will not be going on strike as such, but I will be showing my support as both a member of the UCU because of being a postgraduate student, where I have lots of colleagues and friends, and as someone who has held 0-hour contracts as an hourly paid lecturer, I think I understand very, personally what the impact of, these strikes can be in terms of how they can improve our working conditions and can help us in transforming both the student learning experience and the teaching experience of the staff as well in that sense. I think it's important to understand that the reason that we're striking is something which should matter to the community that we are trying to cultivate at the University of Kent between staff and students, because as Brianna has already mentioned, our working conditions directly impact your learning conditions. And if our working conditions are not where we feel supported, where we have, excessive workload, where we're dealing with stress, around how much we're paid, given the fact that we're living now in a cost of living crisis, where, all of us are feeling the squeeze of inflation. In that sense, any support or any a lot of the difference that our employers can make. It's unfortunate that we are having to strike to get them to understand how they can make that difference in our lives by changing or improving our working conditions. But it is a last resort in that sense. It's also important to understand that the response that has been received so far from the UCEA, which is the Employers Association, has been less than satisfactory, because if you were to go ahead and look at what the conclusion letter was, which was very recent in July of 2022, a large part of the recommendations are that universities essentially start up different sort of working groups, go ahead and scope data, try to have town halls with their staff, which are all different things which might be helpful but do not actually resolve the problem that has been continuing and worsening. And so the strike is a way for us to put further pressure to get more concrete solutions which can be implemented, and also bring our employers to the table to actually discuss with us on our terms as members of staff and those of us who will be joining the profession as to what do we want and how do we maintain the integrity and the future of this profession that we're all investing in, but also in universities as places of learning, as universities as places of community building, as places of sharing knowledge, as a place of sharing space, which can transform people's lives in that sense. So that's all I have to add at the moment. I think I'm going to let the university side sort of come about, and then we can have a broader discussion around that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brianna and Anamika. I really appreciate you giving your side. I will pass it over to Richard to present the university side.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ed, and thank you very much, Brianna and Anamika. Really good to hear from you, and particularly a big thank you to the Kent Union sabbatical officers for providing the jargon buster information. That's enormously helpful, I think, so that we can all kind of speak on from the same page and make sure that we understand the sorts of things that we're talking about when we use these terms all the way through. So I'm very happy to go through the university side as it's described from there. But actually, I'd really say that we shouldn't be sides. We should be working together on some of the issues that have been described. Of course, both the pensions and the paying conditions parts are broadly national issues. University of Kent certainly has a voice in those national issues, but particularly the pay is negotiated nationally. The pensions part is negotiated nationally as well. And the voice that Kent has is actually quite small in this context. Important, but still quite small in the overall context of things that we're trying to do from here. So first of all, I'd like to apologise. I'd like to apologise to any students that are listening to this about the disruption that they'll be facing. For some of you, this will be the first time that you've experienced industrial action because you may have joined the university recently. For others, unfortunately, it'll be all too familiar with you in terms of the industrial action that we've had in recent years. As I say at the beginning, these are national strikes that are affecting all universities. The negotiations that take place around paying conditions and pensions take place nationally, and what we have is a condition whereby there are certainly universities that are perhaps better off than others, but the impact of pay increases need to be considered on all universities across from there. It would be unconscionable for national pay negotiations to insist on national pay awards that would mean, broadly speaking, that some universities may go bust as a consequence of them being able to implement those. But that's the situation that we are currently in. At Kent, as elsewhere across the sector, we want staff to be appropriately rewarded for the work that they do. We appreciate that staff are by far and away our most valuable asset at the institution, and we want to make sure that they are rewarded appropriately. I think both Brianna and Amika both mentioned the cost of living crisis. We feel that the same as everyone else does. Universities feel that the same as everyone else does. The university is by no means immune to issues around the utility bills and gas and electricity bills that are skyrocketing and going through the roof. We've tried to ensure that we protect students from those, particularly those students who are living with us on campus, and have made sure that they will not see increases in their rent, even though our own costs are going up very substantially. Broadly speaking, I don't think strikes the right way to approach the issues that we face. We fully respect. I fully respect the right of staff to strike, but we need to have further discussions between the two parties to make sure that we are able to come to agreements that we can both agree upon and then start to move forward as a consequence. I will say that as a university, we will do everything in our power to mitigate the impact of any strike or other industrial action on your studies. It's difficult at this point to know what the impact is likely to be. Yes, we know about the 3 strike days towards the end of this month, and we will mitigate those wherever we possibly can. It's also important to remember as students that not all of your lecturing staff will be UCU members, and not all of those members who are UCU members will actually be going on strike. So again, the overall proportion is likely to be different in different parts of the university of staff that are taking part in that action. But again, we'll do everything that we can to mitigate the impact of that on your studies. We will make sure that we never devalue your degree or your coursework or any part of the work that you're trying to do. Your futures are as important to the university generally as they are to the individual staff who teach you. Our commitment to you is, of course, that we will refund any direct expenses that you incur as a result of industrial action. So whether there's travel that you incur coming into the university for events that eventually don't take place, or whether there's issues around childcare or other things that you incur as a direct expense for coming to campus for an event that doesn't take place, then the university will reimburse you as a consequence. As we've already heard, staff do not get paid when they are taking part in strike action. That's common practice across not just the university sector, but across all workplaces. This doesn't mean the university will profit from that. Far from it. We'll reinvest that salaries that are not paid to striking colleagues in the student experience, working closely with the sabbatical officers from Kent Union about what might be most appropriate for that. Some of that is likely to be around hardship funding, but there are other initiatives that we would wish to be able to put in place to improve your student experience using those funds. So again, the university will not benefit as a consequence. Our final commitment to you is that the university will be as open and transparent with you as it possibly can throughout this whole process. It is important that you understand the reasons that your lecturing staff will be going on strike, but also the sorts of things that the university itself will be doing in order to try and mitigate the effect on your work, on your academic outcomes, and on your ability to both progress and graduate, which again are our primary concern. We make sure that your learning outcomes are achieved and that you can continue on with your academic studies as best as you can do. So what have we been doing at Kent? As I say, the issues that have been described around pensions and around paying conditions are broadly national issues. At Kent, I'm really proud of what we've done in this regard on almost all aspects of those. All staff have had a 3% pay rise. And that's up to 9% on lower grades. And I know that we've got spiraling inflation at the moment, which is it's substantially in increase of those. But again, we look to work with colleagues both within the unions, UCU, and other university unions to make sure that we can come with something that is appropriate. But again, the pay process themselves is nationally bargained as it goes through from there. We have been able to do some other things. We've been able to increase PhD stipends to all of our internally funded PhD candidates by 10%, again to reflect the conditions that we find ourselves and the costs that have increased as we will have all seen from every aspect of the lives that we lead. We've also got rid of all 0 hours contracts for academic staff. And our aim is to only use 0 hours contracts where it suits all parties. There are some staff who want to have 0 hours contracts because it suits their way of living and it suits the way that they want to live and work. And we're happy to support that, but we will not impose those on staff if they don't want it. We have a people and culture strategy, which includes a staff wellbeing committee, which feeds in a lot of the information that particularly Brianna spoke about around dealing with some of the mental health issues that are not just facing the university sector, but they're also facing a large number of other sectors as well. But we're really keen to make sure that we support our staff and that the University of Kent is a good place to work. We've introduced a number of cost of living measures, both for students and staff. Many of you will have seen the £3 meal deal that's been introduced, so that both students and staff can make sure that they can eat and are supported during the particularly difficult times coming into the winter. Finally, we've ruled out any compulsory redundancies for the current reviews that are underway within our divisions, and we've been working very closely with the local UCU on a redundance avoidance policy to outline the steps that the university and the UCU will take to make sure that staff are protected in their jobs. And that we would only ever look at any form of redundancy, be that voluntary or otherwise, as a very last resort once every other option has been exhausted. So I'm going to stop there because I appreciate that we've now gone through most of our time. I'll stop sharing my screen if I'm able to do that without hanging up. And I'm very happy to open for questions, comments, or anything else that people would like to talk about.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Richard. Appreciate it. Is there any, we'll just open the floor up to any questions for anyone.
If anyone doesn't want to, Anamika, I will let you go in a sec. But if anyone doesn't want to ask their question on audio or with their camera on, please feel free to put it in the chat. Or alternatively, there's a Kent Union strike page. It's just kentunion.co.uk/strike. There's information on there, and there's also ways you can ask us questions through there, and we'll get those answers to you. But I will hand back over.
Do you want to go?
Yeah. No. So I just want to thank Richard Rees, Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor Richard Rees, for his presentation. I think that was very illuminating. It's also, I think, very interesting in the sense that the differentiation between the national context and the local context, because we as staff in local universities didn't decide to take strike action because everything was okay in the local context. So the local context is intimately connected to the national context. Things are going wrong in our universities and our working culture, in other universities and our colleagues' universities, and we see that. And it's out of sense of solidarity, but also in the sense of understanding our own conditions, which are not improving, that we've decided to take this action. And so to say that this is a national issue and not a local issue, I think is a bit disingenuous, because these things are connected to each other. I'm also really sympathetic to, the university struggling with the cost of living crisis, because yes, of course, as a institution, as a business, at the end of the day, that is running on so many operating costs. I can only imagine how hard it must be, but I think it's important, especially for students, to realize that the costs of running a university and the financial planning that might go into running a university is quite different, and the sort of, support that might exist for a university if it is struggling with its finances are very different to what staff and students can rely on, especially those members of staff who are on the lowest paid contracts and on the most insecure contracts. And in that sense, to suggest that there might be some sense of similarity is, it feels a bit insulting, because at the end of the day, I'm not able to pay my rent. I know my friends are not able to, pay their electricity bills. And in that sense, we're not just going to be a business that fails. These are people's lives that might, become unsustainable and very hard to live. And a meal deal is not, unfortunately, going to do a lot in that sense, even though I do understand that it might provide some level of support. But I think there is a need, to become real about the, things that the university can do to support its staff and its students in this crisis, which I feel the university is slightly shirking away from its responsibility in that sense. But also, just to finish, is that a lot of the things that were mentioned on the slide in terms of the PhD stipend increase were only made possible because the UCU worked with Kent Union. So I'm really thankful to Benjamin Bradley for working alongside myself and Ames Clark for helping us actually get the raise in that stipend, which the university was slightly unsure of when it would do it and how long and how it would justify that raise. And also, again, this was something which was won by the UCU PhDs nationally and then implemented locally, again, speaking to how the national context speaks to the local context. So it's important to remember how that happens, right? The fractionalization, so where, the university is saying that they're not going to use 0 hours contract, 0 hours contracts anymore for the academic staff, that's amazing that that has happened after, sustained organizing on the part of those of us who are on those contracts, many of whom are UCU members. Over the summer, myself and again, Ames Clark were working alongside HR to ensure that these policies are put in place. So again, that's a win that is coming from union organizing and not something which is a benevolence of the university, giving it to us as members of staff. We've had to fight for these things. In terms of the compulsory redundancies not happening, that's again something we fought for and won as part of the strike mandate. So I think it's important for students to understand that when the university says that it supports us and it's on our side, they might not be being very honest about that, because when they say that they're on our side but are still mitigating action and preventing us from our action to have, complete and actual impact, I think there are some questions that need to be asked in that sense. And I think that's where the Students' Union and students themselves play a super important role, because there are more similarities in their conditions and our conditions as staff as compared to their conditions and the conditions of senior management or the conditions of the Vice Chancellor. I do not believe that the Vice Chancellor is struggling to heat her home, but most of us are. And I think that is something very, very important for us to remember as to why we are here and why we're doing this. And that's all I have to say on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anamika. I'll pass it to Richard to respond to that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Emeka. That's enormously helpful. I would like to come back in on a couple of the points that you made. The reason for drawing a distinction between the national and the local issues is because there are some things that we can directly influence, which are those around the local things. And many of the things that you mentioned that the UCU have won, of course, have been in discussion with the university, and through negotiation, we've reached the outcomes and the conclusions that are there. Really pleased that that's happened. And that's why, of course, I'm saying that we need to continue those discussions between the university and the UCU so that we can ideally try to understand more about what's there and the way that we go through there. In terms of the cost of living crisis, again, I know the sabbatical office at Kent Union will be aware that that we've established task forces, both on the staff side and on the student side, to work through the sorts of things that the university can do in regards to trying to ensure that both students and staff are supported as much as possible during that during what are, we know are going to be extremely difficult times because of the background of everything that we hear about in terms of everything increasing in price and inflation, running very high. So again, it's coming through from there. But what I really just wanted to try and reinforce was that notion of, by continuing to work together, the UCU and the university can achieve a lot. What you described there is, some really big wins for both staff and students, and I'm really keen that we can continue to do that.
Thank you for that, Richard. Appreciate your points. We have a question from the student, Joe.
I'd say thank you for both of representatives talking. I can understand that these conversations can probably be quite frustrating. My question is more directed towards the executive group, and I'm a bit confused why the sort of university is unable to sort of meet the negotiations which are happening or meeting the UCU's demands which are happening on the local level. It seems like issues like working conditions aren't national, or they're national on one extent, but also the university has power to make changes. But it seems like there is still some friction happening, and it is why isn't the university able to help with those issues as much as it is being asked?
Yeah, thanks so much, Joe. I'm happy to take that one because I think that's probably directed at me. What I was trying to draw the distinction between was some things that are negotiated nationally, which is pay and pensions, and then the other things that we can continue to work with colleagues from UCU and the other trade unions on campus on as well. So you're absolutely right. There are some things that are directly within our control. And we try to make sure that we do things that are affordable, yes, and the university can afford, but will support our staff and our students as a consequence. The primary, my primary concern is to make sure during all of this process that students are not disadvantaged as a consequence of any action that's being taken. It's not the students' fault. And it is really important to make sure the university is positioned. If we weren't taking this position, you would quite rightly say to me that I'm being derelict in my duty in terms of making sure that students can progress. I'm acutely aware of that. It's not something that sits comfortably with me, but it's something that I will absolutely make sure is done to the best of the ability of the university. Other things, you're right, we need to make sure that we continue to work and continue to discuss and negotiate so that we can understand all of the issues that are affecting staff. It's not just single things, but there are a variety of things in there, and work with staff to make sure that we can resolve those as best as we can.
Joe, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I guess sort of the point is, while I understand the university is trying to sort of alleviate the problems caused by the strikes, it's a lose-lose situation. The fact that we're in a strike, or we got to the strikes, is a lose-lose situation for both the university, for staff, and students as well. So I guess the real question is, aside from the university being unable to deal with things, I guess why has it reached this point? Why have we got to have strikes? Because it happens every year, and it's kind of like, it seems like there's this intractable conflict dynamic which is ingrained in the education system at the moment, and it's down to unions and the universities to sort of find a different way of dealing with this, because it's not fair on students. We lose out every year.
Yeah, I'd fully agree with you, Joe, that we do want to find a way through so that we can do this. So some of these disputes have been extremely long running, particularly around the pensions part. That goes back a very considerable number of years. But you're right. I mean, it's not fair on students. The impact that we're seeing year after year, particularly off the back of 2 horrible years of COVID, have not really helped in this regard. But we're keen to continue the discussions at the local level to make sure that we can agree with what we can do with the union representatives to try and make things better at Kent.
Brianna, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to come in on that and just say, Joe, I echo your question myself. Why do we keep having to do this every year? It isn't fair to you. One of the reasons is because these university employer bodies that, you know, Karen Cox, our Vice Chancellor, sits on the board of, are not really making any real concessions to meet these demands. For example, these huge cuts to our pensions, which have now been deemed absolutely unnecessary. The pension scheme is very healthy. It's got a big surplus, could easily pay back what's already been lost. You know, that seems like it could be an easy win, you know, for national negotiations. So why is it that we've been driven to having to take strike action to try to get movement on that? You know, issues of systemic inequalities based on gender, ethnicity, and pay. Why is it that we're having to continually take the strike action to get universities to take any sort of meaningful action to try to resolve these issues, which are just absolutely unacceptable, you know? So I sympathize with your question, and our hope is that the fact that, you know, we have 150 universities now going to be participating in this, that's 150 Karen Coxes at universities around the country, and maybe one Karen Cox, you know, arguably could or could not have a big influence, but 150 of them sure could. So that's why, you know, that's why we're taking this action, in the hope that it will compel some movement on these important issues.
Thank you for that, Brianna. Richard, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just to come back on that. I mean, the University of Kent has been, and actually through having our Vice Chancellor as part of the particularly the UCISA group is pushing for a governance review of the university superannuation scheme. I know that may sound like a technical thing, and for most people it's not going to make a big difference, but I think it gets to the heart of what Brianna was talking about, which is a part of a long-running dispute from there. We are looking, I mean, the superannuation scheme is undergoing another re-evaluation around March next year. So we'll have a better idea of the position that the scheme stands at the moment. At the moment, though, it's still in deficit, and we need to move on that line. But by looking really carefully at that governance, then hopefully we can start to unpick some of the issues that keep recurring with this. Because broadly speaking, I mean, I would absolutely agree with Brianna that, you know, we can't continue in this process because it's not serving anyone, you know, either students or staff or anyone, universities, anyone any good. We need to be able to find a resolution to that.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for a respectful discussion as well. I really appreciate it. Is there any other questions from anyone? Nothing that is typing. If anyone does have any questions or comments, yeah, let's plug that in. So everyone who's here, there is a Google Forms in the chat, and that Google Form is basically to gauge students' perceptions of the strike, whether they support the strike action and the cause, whether they support the cause but not the strike action, or whether they don't support it. And this helps us kind of take this data to Kent Union Parliament so that the members of Kent Union Parliament vote in what the student body wants and is more representative of that. I really would like to give a massive thank you to UCU members, Brianna and Anamika, and Richard for coming along as well and taking part in this consultation. We really appreciate it. We want to make sure that we're giving both sides their kind of chance to speak their mind and for them to give students the information from each side. And we want to make sure that every student has all the resources that they need to be able to know what the strikes are about and how to go about it and how to mitigate it for it. If any students do need any help, please do reach out to us through our email, through the website as well. I've put in the link for the strike forum page as well on our website, so you can go through that. We also have the academic experience reporting tool. So if you do have any lectures that you've missed or anything that you want to flag up in terms of academic experience, please do use that academic experience reporting tool. It gives us a clear idea of where it's kind of lacking, and then we can take that to the university and also access proof. And if there's no other questions, I think we'll end the strike consultation there.
Thanks so much, Ed. Thanks so much, everyone. Good to talk to you all. Thanks so much, Brianna and Amika as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about it.
Really.
Thank you, everyone.
Hopefully see you guys at the next one.
Thank you,
everyone.
Sure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.